Welcome to the Legends of Kansas podcast. This is on the back of a heartbreaking loss for the Kansas Jayhawks. They fell to Cincinnati 37-34 at home in a game they felt like they had a real chance to win. From the opening kickoff, there were fireworks, literally. The first play on offense, Jalen Daniels was locked in, hit Emmanuel Sanders on a 93-yard touchdown. That's his second such touchdown in consecutive weeks. He's only the fourth Kansas player to have multiple 90-plus yard touchdowns, and he did it within 4 games of his Kansas career, 5 games, I should say. What an incredible player. And him and E-Man and JD, they are just rolling. They have a great chemistry. They went for over 200 yards receiving. E-Man Henderson was the first person to do so since Steven Sims Jr., so it's been a while, and it was nice to see him get out and make those plays. But as much as their brilliance lifted the Jayhawks, it also exposed the lack of balance that this offense is still chasing in terms of running the football and how they can be more effective. And it really showed up in the red zone in this game, where they had 6 goal-to-go opportunities that ended up in 3 goal-to-go opportunities that ended up in 6 points. Not good enough, especially when you end up losing the game by 3 points. So we'll talk about how Emmanuel's kind of gravity can help us get some consistency in the run game. We'll talk about these weapons outside: Quebeca, Wentz, Canty, Groen. All these guys flash. 3 of them went for over 50 yards. We'll talk about that and how this offense can project. But the harsher truth is that inconsistency just kept us from doing the things that we wanted to do on offense, the things that are required to win a football game, especially a close conference game, and will be required again to win a road game out in Orlando. So this is going to be a big challenge. We're going to talk about the defense as well. What kind of things we saw? When are these guys going to step up and make the plays that they need to make? Because there's a bunch of ways to look at this, whether it be statistical, whether it be 1 point of the game, whether it be total game management. But ultimately, what it comes down to is players play. And it's time for these guys that are as talented as anyone we've seen in Kansas uniforms to make plays when the moment requires. Now we welcome Chris Harris Jr. to the Legends of Kansas podcast, the Super Bowl champion himself. But we've got some more championship news that we want to talk to him about. Big news in the high school football world. Bixby High School, number 1 in the nation. And you are talking to the Bixby legend, Chris Harris. Chris, just talk about, the role you've played at Bixby, what it's like, whether from a fan perspective or now as an alumnus. Just talk about the whole Bixby program from your perspective, from being to number 1 in the nation.
Man, my family has a long history there, from aunties, uncles, everybody going there. My family's been there for over 100 years. So, we have a little area in South Bixby we call Snake Creek. Is straight country, man. And that's where you'll find all my family, back there. But we breed dogs out of there. We got a lot of playmakers that come through there. And just seeing now, man, those kids go out there and put in the work every week. Coach Montgomery's a hell of a coach, the head coach out there. I'm surprised a lot of college coaches haven't came out there. I mean, he's about to win. Go over 10-plus state championships, on a dominant run. And he's shown that he can run a program. But I don't want him to leave. But I'm surprised no other, Oklahoma State jobs open, TU's open, was open. But, just they have playmakers, man. And I still train a lot of those guys and get to work with a lot of those guys. So I'm glad to see those boys be ranked number 1 in the nation. And I believe they should be. I think Texas football, the team-wise, is a little down this year from, I live out here, so I get to see both. And I think they could definitely come out here and compete for sure.
I think it's just so cool. The basically the foundation of the Orange Bowl team that we both played on was a lot of Oklahoma guys, guys that just got the job done, guys that, so I've always been fond of Oklahoma football, but over the last 10 years or so, it's been something different. You look at every major roster, you'll see a Tulsa, Oklahoma somewhere on there, just a strong football culture. And I just think it's past time for them to get their due and get their flowers in terms of what they've been nationally, just in general. It's not just Bixby, multiple programs, but it's cool to have Bixby sitting at the top because football has been played to that level for quite some time down there. So it's cool to see that validation. So let's move on into that Jayhawk football. Jalen was Jalen. I can't stress enough, how much fun it is to watch this guy play football. That game in the end, you ended up with a miserable result, something you wish would have gone another way. But man, all my memories of watching this guy just make play after play, do it with his feet, use his knowledge to take advantage of those soft zones and set people up for big plays and big runs. Just talk about his performance, his connectivity with E-Man, and just what you enjoyed about what this offense was able to do.
I thought he just came out and played better, definitely, than the week before, and was more accurate. Did it with his legs and his arm again. And he played a great game, damn near perfect, other than the fumble.
Right.
Other than the fumble, he had an excellent game. The only thing is the guy across from him played even better.
Yep.
Right? You can argue and say, but he also had more of a run game help. JD's part of our run game at Kansas. So you expect him to just continue to carry the load, and he's doing it every week. But we need the defense just to help him out, give him a couple turnovers, give him the ball back on short drives, and he's not getting that help right now.
Yeah, and you looked at you look at the run game, and it was better, right? You had 10 carries for 64 yards for Le'Shawn Williams, which is a good number. That's 6.5 yards a carry. But one of those carries, 26 yards came on one of those carries, so it's more like 9 for 30, and that's a 3-yard a carry average. And when you watch the team, when I'm in person, I have one interpretation of the game. I'm experiencing it one way, feeling it one way, and I go home and watch it, and it's so much different. And one of the things that stood out was Kansas. It's not about Kansas getting beat up front. It's not like guys are getting dominated and there's nowhere to run. It's continuity. The run game is a collective system. The running back has to set up blocks for the offensive line. He's got to create angles. He's got to use his eyes. He's got to deceive those guys. He's got to make the seams on his own sometimes and help the scheme work better. If you looked at the schemes on pre-snap, Chris, there was nothing not to like. We had 6 guys, they had 5, and our running back essentially outnumbered them. But for whatever reason, working like a duo system, we didn't run as much inside outside zone. It was more duo, tag team, double teams is basically what duo is. And you run it when the alignment is good, right? When you have a good alignment for it. Since Cincinnati plays basically the same box most of the time, you had a great look at it. And I know it's got to be maddening for this coaching staff not to find the pieces to fit together. One time it was the tackle tight end double team. The tackle left a little early. Tight end got beat across his face. The next time tight end does his job, has him back in the line of scrimmage, gets beat across his face late, but there was an opportunity for Le'Shawn Williams to lean in and kind of bounce around or hit the initial seam and get 6 or 7 yards. Instead, it ended up in 2. And that's the scenarios you're talking about with JD, where you're in 2nd and 8 and you're in 2nd and 9 and you're just behind the sticks, and you got to find a way to make up for it. And Kansas has just struggled with that. And on top of that, that run game is exasperating another issue, which is this offense has been they've been top 5 in the nation in 3rd down conversion rate every year that Leipold's been here since his first year. Even last year when they struggled offensively, they were over 55% on 3rd down. And Chris, it's because they could run the ball. They were not in 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8 plus. So just talk about, from your perspective, what you're seeing in the run game, what you'd like to see. And this is beyond personnel, just what you'd like to see from an execution standpoint.
Yeah. I just think we couldn't fully get it all the way going, just because Cincinnati was scoring so fast, and they're converting 3rd downs. And when you give up 600 yards on defense, that's extremely even hard for the offense to get the run game going. And that's kind of what I seen. I think we could have ran the ball on them. We just couldn't be consistent with it, just because we were down. And when you get in those situations, we got to score fast. And I think we're just trying to keep up with their pace. We never got into our real, even though we balled on offense, right? We never got into like the game plan that we wanted. And that kind of goes with the defense. The defense kind of dictated the game and how we're going to play. And you want to dictate the game in your favor,
right,
on defense. And we just didn't have it right there. We'll get into it later as we go on the show. But I feel like we could have definitely ran the ball. We could have did anything we wanted on offense, I believe. They load the box up, so we hit them with the RPOs, and Henderson gone. So I feel like offense. I don't think they could stop us really. We had one little fumble with JD, and they won the turnover battle with that and the yardage. So it's a team game, but the other side of the football, they got to definitely step it up going on as the games get bigger.
Absolutely. You look at JD, 19 for 28 for 445 yards and 4 touchdowns is an absurd stat line. And
Yeah,
had a lot to do with his connection to E-Man. He was incredible. He had another 14 carries for 55 yards. So he supplemented the run game, basically himself. You throw in the 2 quarterback runs for the backups, Cole Ballard and Zeke Marshall. That takes you up to 16 carries for 84 yards from the quarterback group. So they did more than carry their weight. I mean, they basically went over 500 yards as a group. So you got to love that. But you also, you also know why they settled for field goals early in the game. When you're in goal to go situations, it's hard to throw the football when people are playing drop 8, which is what Cincinnati likes to do. There's not a lot of windows to fit the balls into. That's why you would see JD look it over and just throw it through the end zone. There's nowhere to go with that football. And that's where to me, like you mentioned, they could have ran the ball. They could have gotten a better rhythm. They could have been more consistent with it, but they realized they were in a shootout and they got away from it a little bit. But their lack of continuity early in the season, that's to me what cost them in the red zone. When you're not able to make those opportunities turn into something positive, that's where you get in trouble. And that's where they struggled in terms of, you got a goal to go and you end up with a field goal instead of a touchdown, and then you lose by a field goal. And that's just ends up being is what it is. And it's hard to overcome those things, especially you throw in the turnover. It was huge in the moment, but I felt like there was so much redemption for JD to put together another drive, to be incredible on that drive, score the touchdown, and still get him through the finish line. I thought that was a big response by him, and it just wasn't enough because they couldn't get the stops that they needed on the defensive end. So let's just go ahead and shift on into defense and talk about what we saw there. One of the things that stands out to me is the similarities between this game and the Missouri game, in that the stat line is just massive, right? You see the yardage, it's overwhelming. There were moments in the game where they felt disconnected. The lates, losing by a field goal and giving up, 2 runs that basically break the game open, and you basically gift them the field goal that was the difference in the game for that run just before the 2-minute drill. And that is so similar to what they did against Missouri. Gave up a big run and then gave up an option route that ended up being a big catch, got them inside the 5. They got a field goal out of that with 3 seconds. And this was the same scenario. Just an unfortunate turn of events. No matter what happened in the game, there is a certain amount of detail you'd like to see the defense that they just didn't have. What did you see there just at the end of the half? Just the similarities between the two. It's easy to point to something schematic and say this was a schematic error, but players play. And just looking at that sequence, it was frustrating. This was a team that was trying to run the clock out like Missouri. They're backed up, minutes and change left. They're like, let's get into the half. We had a good half. We like where we're at. And you give up points. Just talk about what you saw there and how that kind of, felt deflating for the defense and for the fan base.
I didn't like it at all. I didn't like how I feel like anytime they got to the red zone or the goal line, it was a touchdown because they were just bullying us in the end zone. So I didn't like that part. I knew the running back, is it Wilson or Walker? I knew Walker. Yeah, I knew Walker was a good player, man. Just watching the week before and just watching a couple games of Cincinnati. He was pretty much carrying that team, the first couple of weeks because Sorsby hadn't looked like this.
No.
Right. He opened it up the last probably 2-3 weeks. Has it been 3 weeks since they played Nebraska?
Yes, it has. Yeah, they played week 0, so it's been a while.
After the Nebraska game, they just manned up and got up in Cincinnati and could cover those guys. And maybe, right now that was a game that kind of exploited, no Melo Dotson, no Kobe Bryant this game, right? Because we couldn't stop the pass at all. We couldn't stop the run. We made Sorsby look like he was, a draftable guy. He looked really good.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect him to play that well. So defensively, they attacked our scheme. They attacked the Bear front with stretches and different type of quarterback read runs. And then they brought in the backup running back. What was his name?
Fire. Very
fire. He killed us, and he hadn't been doing anything all year. So I think that's probably the game changer right there prior, because
Yeah.
he hadn't been doing anything, and then bam, he pops up, he's busting on us. And
Yeah.
then the receivers, I mean, I said this before. If they go back and listen Friday, I said they have a veteran receiving crew. They hadn't got off yet. They haven't been productive like you expect. But those guys are all seniors and juniors that has played a lot. So I think they took advantage of our youth on the secondary for sure.
Absolutely. I thought there was, when you're playing a team coming off a bye week, they're going to have a good plan, and their plan was pretty clear. If you look at the box score, Cyrus Allen, 11 receptions, 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. This is a Texas A&M guy. This guy had a jetpack on his back as well. Very fast, very tough route runner. And he, essentially they loved getting into that trio look where they had 3 receivers into the boundary and they were confident they could get a matchup that he liked. And every time he got it, he won, and that's a good player. And it's like you mentioned, like, these guys had talent. And what was interesting about Sorsby is his numbers at times suggested he would be this when they played lesser opponents. But, against Nebraska, 3rd and long, this guy was taking off running, before he'd even looked down the field. So, like you mentioned, that was 3 weeks ago. It was a new receiving core, and obviously his continuity and trust with that group has grown a great deal because, when he had a clean pocket, he was incredible. When he had pressure in his face, he made plays at times, but he also put the ball in danger. That's where Kansas had a chance late in the game to get that 3rd down interception on the tip drill, and it was a cause of pressure. I do want to focus a little bit on the defensive line. This was a group that dominated the West Virginia game. I think their top 4 tacklers were all defensive line, so that's a good sign. That means you're keeping guys at the line of scrimmage, and this is a game where the opposite was true, where it was all DBs at the top of the tackle chart. And, that's usually a product of not being able to contain that passing game. And, and it was, it puts you in a tough spot because this team is not necessarily struggling with schematics. It's not always a matter of, they have us outgunned. It's really just a matter of executing in the biggest moments. The 2 things that they had in common with the Missouri game, Chris, was four 10-play plus scoring drives. 4 for Cincinnati, 4 for Missouri. That is hard to overcome, and that is a product of a defense that's making you earn it, but can't be at their best when their best requires it. Can't get off the field when they need it the most. Just talk about how important getting off the field has been in your career and what that does to your psyche as a defense when you are giving up multiple 10-play drives and not able to get off the field when you really need it.
It drains your defense. The offense stand on the field, and their defense is getting rest, and we're out there. We're drained, and you might not feel it in the first half, but second half, that's when it starts pounding on you. And when you can do that, and you're facing a team that might not have the best depth, that's when you can really take advantage of it. And luckily, I wasn't on a lot of defenses that we did that. We're able to get off on 3rd down fairly fairly well. And that's what you got to be. We got to get identity. And I think this game, we just couldn't stop the guys and we couldn't stop the receivers. So, we had to put more back on the coverages. And when we started doing that, that opened up the run game now. Now the run game is a little bit leaky. So it ties in together. You can't, I hate when people say, oh man, their D line is just not good. They can't stop the run. Well, is the linebackers fitting right? Is the safeties fitting right? Is the corners capping it right? It's a team game when it comes to defense. And right now, secondary, we gotta definitely hold our own a little bit better. And so we can be able to stop the run better and not let these teams get in rhythms and be able to get off the field on 3rd down. And when we do that getting off on 3rd down kills the run game for other teams too.
Yes. Yeah, and it's like you mentioned for the Nebraska game, the recipe was clear, right? Stop the run on 1st down, compete on 2nd down, get them in that 3rd and 6 plus, and Cincinnati hadn't shown the ability to really be successful at that. Well, that's kind of what was happening. Their opening touchdown drive, 1st down, stopped the run, 2nd down, got another stop, 3rd down, got another stop, gave up a 4th and 1. And that's been the kind of thing that's what makes 10 and 12 play and 17 play drives in one, bizarre instance in Missouri is when they're able to convert 4th downs. Yes, your defense is making them earn it. Yes, you're making them snap the ball over and over again. And credit to them, right? This wasn't a lack of effort. There was a play where they, cut the tight end loose, and Jalen Todd, the backside corner, ran him down and tackled him at the 1 yard line. That resulted in a field goal. They got a holding penalty the next play. They were able to hold him to a field goal and stay in the game. So it's not an effort thing. It's about when that moment is there, can you make the play? Can you do enough? And I don't see any reason why these guys can't. You're looking at maybe the most talented defense Kansas has had in at least a decade. And you can see it across the board, with guys like Trey Lathan, with guys like Bengali Kamara, who's continuously makes plays. A guy I've been really impressed with is Blake Harrell. Just to be a high school tight end from Iowa that broke his leg his senior year to becoming, in his third year at Kansas, just really emerging as a force at D tackling. This was a group, Cincinnati, that hadn't given up a sack all year. The first punt of the game was Blake Harrell. He got a hit on the quarterback and forced an incomplete pass. He got the first sack of the game. He was playing outside, inside. I thought he was just really impressive. He had a really good game, and kind of shows you that the talent up front is special. But it comes down to some of the same stuff, Chris. You can win up front and miss a tackle, and it doesn't matter. You can play great coverage and be in position and not play the ball in the air, and it doesn't matter. And I'm seeing a lot of that. So just describe what you would like to see for these things to improve, and things that can show that progress is heading in the right direction as they head down to Orlando.
I just want to see teams earn it, even if they do go on 4th down and they get it. We made them work for that, right? And I'm just, seeing guys run loose, wide open. That just kills me as a defensive player, especially these tight ends. And I don't think we made Sorsby really had to think. He kind of already knew where he was throwing, and we pretty much gave away easy passes to him. So I just want us to tighten up a little bit. I think we kind of went away what we've been doing, what we did from Missouri. I don't think we played as much man versus this team.
Right.
We kind of set back a little bit more zone. So I would like for us to get it back to a little bit more man, more press. We're not very aggressive on the line when you watch Kansas right now. Yeah. Do you see that, or is that just me?
No, I'm seeing the same thing. I honestly think that, part of playing into this strategy was they did have injuries at safety, and that might have convinced them, not having the depth pieces. Maybe that convinced them to not be in as much man. But I do agree with you at the line of scrimmage. I think that Austin Alexander and Jalen Todd have held up really well in coverage. I would like to see him get the opportunity to challenge those guys. It's not, these guys aren't getting, we talked a little bit about this, but rarely early in the season has a Kansas corner, been beat one-on-one outside the numbers. I mean, it almost never happens. Now they're struggling a little bit with covering drag concepts and the deep overs, and that, that's in alignment with what you're saying. So if they're able to stay with the guys and cover one-on-one on their side of the field, will it help to put them up in the line of scrimmage to maybe take some things away? That they're not showing that they have any limitation in terms of staying with guys. There was some safety mismatches that, it was clear Cincinnati had the advantage. I didn't feel like our corners were overmatched physically at all. So I agree with you. I would like to see some of that, a little bit of a mix up with those corners getting up and being able to play with their hands. I think it could, just muddy up the look, because one of the things you said was they didn't make Sorsby have to think. And in the biggest moments against Missouri, I could show you film breakdowns where that was the case. Where Pribula, he didn't have to think about where he was going to go to the ball. It was, he knew where he was going, and that's an advantage offense. Even if, even when a guy makes a play, because I love that you said that, because that 4th and 6 to Coleman, that Missouri converted, Lyric Rawls was right there. I mean, he accelerated, threw his hand in there, hit the guy, but there was an advantage to Pribula knowing exactly where he was going to go with that football, knowing what location to be safe with, and really advantage Missouri. So, we've liked what DK has done. We've liked how he's mixed things up. We've liked how he's used his personnel. So what kind of things do you think they can start to do to make the picture a little bit cloudier for these Big 12 quarterbacks?
Try to disguise more, even though we have disguise, but I think sometimes you just got to line up and just play football. Right. And I think we're at that point now. Pretty much everybody kind of understands our system and what we're doing. We're trying to move fronts and do different things. with our D line, and that has been successful. I can't say that it hasn't until last weekend. But I think once the team has us, like a Cincinnati had us, I think we got to jump out of that. We got to, kind of change the front, kind of switch it up, come with a new game plan because it wasn't working, and I don't think we adjusted. So hopefully we can adjust this week. DK he's pretty solid of doing that. He usually doesn't come out the same way multiple weeks.
Right.
But he did last week though. He came
Yeah.
out with a lot of the same stuff. So hopefully next week they come out with a new game plan. I got to look at UCF, see what their offense is looking like. But we'll have a good study for them to what to prepare for this weekend when we see them and start studying them. But you got to play a little bit more aggressive. That's the only thing I would say is we're sitting back on our heels too much, and I want us to just play more aggressive. Let's fight these guys at the line a lot more. And I think let's put more onus on our corners. I think we kind of, I don't know if he's been babying them a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, they're young.
But I think you can kind of let them loose now.
Yeah, they're youngsters, and you could understand, wanting to move slowly with, what you expose them to, and it's kind of what they've taken away structurally too. It's not just all on the corners. They've made it hard, to throw one-on-one and beat a corner down the field, especially with playing some of the two-man stuff. So they've done things to protect them. But I'm with you, man. I think this is, over the last 2 seasons, I would say that this is the overarching theme of where Kansas football is as a program. If you think about where this team was 3-4 years ago and you compare it to now, it's not comparable. The amount of talent, the amount of depth. One of the things that I loved about the game, from a micro perspective was, Dak Brinkley had been out, number 9, the edge player. He'd been out, with some kind of knee injury for the last couple weeks. And, Kansas brought him in, and he was such a different type of player to what Kansas had been playing on the edge. He really had his way. He forced a holding penalty that was huge. He also had a hands to the face on that interception that should have been, that wasn't called. He came in and created havoc. And I like having a bunch of different types of players, that can give you a different look. I could say the same thing about the offense. When they got backed up on that holding penalty on the drive where they scored the go-ahead touchdown, that 2nd and 15 that Keaton Quebeca converted on that quick out, Chris, that was a 2-man route. I mean, he really had to win. He had to win. That was a 2-man route with a late tight end release. This guy fakes an inside move, gets outside, gets the first down, gets out of bounds. He's a different kind of player than Levi Wentz. We got a chance to see Bryson Canty, another unique type of player, big physical receiver. So the talent is there. The skill is there. The schematics are there. But the theme of this podcast is players play. And part of it is, I saw Coach Leipold have a press conference response yesterday where this question came up about, them changing their approach to practicing football situations. But the thing about big-time college football is you cannot simulate the pressure of these situations. You cannot simulate the requirements of these situations. You have to prepare, and when your moment comes, you have to take it. There's not a win that we had in that Orange Bowl season that was not a product of guys just stepping up and taking it and having a moment. And now they need that, right? You saw JD made a mistake, recovered, had a big moment, touchdown, down on the goal line, that gave them the lead. So I see a lot of talks about the decision making and those kind of things. Like, what could he have done differently to protect the defense? Should he have gone for that touchdown as early as he did? But like we said, when you can't run the ball on the goal line, you don't know when you're going to score. You don't. It's not as easy as, I'm going to get 7 yards on first down. So now we got a couple downs to play with. They didn't have any downs to play with. They had already failed twice on goal to go scoring touchdowns, specifically because they struggled to run the football. So you start to see how all these things come together, and it really does just become about, can this player make the play and finish this game? And that's just an example of it. Closing thoughts on this week, Chris? Anything else you want to get out that you saw that you liked, or something that you'd like to see improved, or just where they're at heading into the Big 12? We got a good look at the Big 12 itself. Early season, Big 12 football is kind of hard to peg. Every football is kind of hard to peg because, they're playing non-conference and such. So the matchups are looking interesting. I think everything is still in front of this Kansas team as the season progresses. Any final thoughts that you have on this one, Chris?
Yeah, the Big 12, I think, is still wide open. I don't know how good Iowa State is going to be and finish strong. Right now I think they're undefeated. Arizona State, they got the pieces and the athletes to be able to come back and win the conference with
Yeah,
the quarterback and the receivers they have. Utah, Texas Tech, it's going to be, they got a chance. It's still wide open, right? But you got to win these games. You got to win these home games, especially when a team like Cincinnati has to travel down to your house. We got to win that game. So my main thing is now you got to go and steal one on the road and let's get back on track this week.
absolutely. And the best way to get on track is to go on the road. One of the things I loved about the road and the road trip is it's just you guys. It's just the team. It's just you and the coaching staff. Ain't nobody there. Nobody's looking at you, to be, the favorite or whatever. They're going to be in there wanting to win. There's going to be a sellout. It's a night game. They call that thing the bounce house. It's going to be a lot of fun. But this Kansas team, like you said, has every opportunity still sitting in front of them. You watch any round of Big 12 games, every big win requires execution late game. The TCU Arizona State game, the way that it mirrored this game is incredible. TCU drove the ball down 7, kicked a field goal, missed it. So they had to get a stop. They got to stop. That's the same thing that happened in Kansas when they fumbled the football. They had a chance, blew it, had to get a stop. Kansas got to stop. Arizona State got to stop. Kansas goes down, scores, gets a touchdown, takes the lead. Arizona State goes down, scores, ties it, gets the ball back, kicks a field goal, has the lead. So TCU had the ball late in the game. Arizona State's home, and TCU had to try to drive down to score. And Arizona State intercepted the ball on second down. And that was the end of that. So there was no talking about, boy, Arizona State, these late game struggles, or, they didn't execute well when they had the chance because they took care of business. And as a person that likes to talk about statistics and talk about different ways to look at the game, I think at this point with Kansas football, it's time for the players to play. I think the coaches have put them in positions to be successful. I think they've done an incredible job building the team up, and this is a good team. So what we want to see is some execution heading down to Orlando. All their Big 12 dreams are still alive. This is the Legends of Kansas podcast. We will catch you next week. Catch Chris on the Crimson and Blue Show starting Saturday for the Central Florida game. Thank you.